The ventilation system of a Boeing 777 is a marvel of fluid dynamics. It is the lung of the aircraft, a complex vascular network of aluminum ducts and HEPA filters designed to scrub the exhalations of 300 people, mix them with freezing stratospheric air, heat the concoction to a livable temperature, and pump it back into the cabin. It is efficient, silent, and entirely democratic. It does not care if you are a senator or a smuggler, it feeds everyone the same oxygen. Or, in this specific instance, the same high-velocity particulate matter. The physics of the accident in the cargo hold were complete. The industrial solvent, now liberated from its lead-lined prison and flash-fried by the alcohol fire, had ceased to be a solid. It was now a ghost. 50 kilograms of cocaine hydrochloride had been atomized into a cloud of microscopic crystals, a white fog so fine it behaved less like dust and more like a gas. Because of the pressure differential created by the fire, the recirculation fans in the belly of the plane roared like starving beasts, sucking the entire cloud into the mixing manifold. Usually, the air is diluted. But the system was overwhelmed. This wasn't a homeopathic dose, it was a direct injection. And, due to a quirk of aerospace plumbing designed to keep odors at bay, the fresh air supply lines prioritized two locations before dispersing into the main cabin, the cockpit, which was on a separate, sealed circuit, thankfully, and the lavatories, which were not. Brenda Miller was in the backward lavatory, near economy class, since the first-class bathrooms were all locked, occupying the space with the territorial grimness of a general in a bunker. She had retreated there not out of biological necessity, but out of spiritual need. The walk past the economy section during boarding, seeing those hoodies, the lack of decorum, the smell of fast food, had left her feeling spiritually greasy. She needed to reset. She needed to sanitize. Brenda stood before the stainless steel mirror, scrubbing her hands with a wet wipe until the skin was raw and pink. The lavatory was small, claustrophobic, and lit by unflattering fluorescent strips that buzzed with a low, headache-inducing frequency. Above her head, the air vent, a plastic nozzle stained slightly yellow by years of service, hissed. Usually, the air from these vents is stale. Today, it was crisp. It was unnaturally cold. It carried a scent that was sharp, metallic, and vaguely medicinal, like a hospital that had been cleaned with lightning. Brenda stopped scrubbing. She looked at the vent. She frowned. "Drafty," she muttered, her voice sounding loud in the small space. She reached up to twist the nozzle shut, her face inches from the opening. As she inhaled, the first concentrated wave hit her. It wasn't a drift, it was a blast. The pressure in the system forced a visible jet of white mist directly into her nostrils and open mouth. It didn't burn. That was the surprise. It numbed. The sensation started at the back of her throat, a sudden, icy anesthesia that made her swallow reflex vanish. Then, it hit the bloodstream. Inhalation is the most efficient delivery system for cocaine, bypassing the liver and hitting the brain in roughly 7 seconds. Brenda took a massive, confused breath, pulling the fog deep into her lungs. 1. Her heart stuttered, then kicked like a mule. 2. The fluorescent lights stopped buzzing. They started singing. 3. The pupils of her eyes blew out, eclipsing the watery blue irises until her eyes were black holes absorbing every photon in the room. 4. The mirror. She looked at her reflection. The wrinkle between her eyebrows smoothed out. The fatigue vanished. She didn't look like a 50-year-old HOA president worried about property taxes anymore. She looked like a Valkyrie. She looked like justice. 5. The paranoia arrived. It didn't sneak up, it kicked down the door. The sound of the engine outside wasn't wind, it was whispering. "They know," the engine said. "They are coming for the perimeter." 6. Brenda felt a surge of energy so violent she thought her teeth might vibrate out of her skull. Her brain, already primed by years of cable news fearmongering and suburban isolation, took the chemical fire and poured it directly into her bias centers. 7. She unlocked the door. In the aisle outside the lavatory, Marcus and Tyrell were standing near the galley, stretching their legs. They were both 22 years old, cousins on their way to an architecture study abroad program in Lisbon. They were speaking in low tones about the turbulence, laughing quietly about how Tyrell had almost spilled his Sprite. The lavatory door slammed open with enough force to crack the plastic laminate. Brenda stood in the doorway. She was vibrating. Literally vibrating. Her hair, usually sprayed into a helmet of compliance, seemed to be standing on end. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, and fixed on Marcus with the intensity of a laser guidance system. "I hear you," Brenda screamed. It wasn't a voice, it was a shriek of tearing metal. Marcus jumped back, hands raising instinctively. "Whoa, ma'am? You okay?" To Brenda, this wasn't a polite inquiry. In her chemically rewired cortex, Marcus's movement was an attack. The shadows around him stretched and warped. The harmless plastic cup in Tyrell's hand transformed into a weapon. The cocaine had taken her latent, low-level racism, the kind that crosses the street to avoid walking near a teenager, and turned it into a full-blown hallucinogenic narrative. "I know what you're planning." Brenda lunged into the aisle, pointing a finger that shook like a tuning fork. "You think I'm stupid? You think I don't see the signals? You're going to breach the cockpit. You're going to come for the women." "Lady, we're just standing here," Tyrell said, looking around for a flight attendant. "You need to chill." "Chill?" Brenda laughed. It was a terrifying sound, a cackle that scraped the bottom of her throat. "I am the only one who is awake. The perimeter is breached." She grabbed a wine bottle from the unattended service cart nearby. She didn't hold it like a drink, she held it like a club. "Get back," she swung the bottle wildly. "I won't let you hurt us. I am the line. I am the wall." The commotion drew attention. Heads popped up over the seatbacks in economy. Here is where the tragedy of physics met the tragedy of sociology. The air circulation in the cabin moves from back to front. The mist that had blasted Brenda was now drifting steadily into the lungs of the first 10 rows of economy. The passengers watching this unfolding drama were not sober observers. They were 30 seconds into their own involuntary dosing. Their hearts were racing. Their fight-or-flight responses were being hot-wired. A middle-aged man in row 12, a mild-mannered accountant named Gary who usually avoided conflict at all costs, felt a sudden, thumping rage in his chest. He saw a white woman screaming about being attacked. He saw 2 black men standing near her. His brain, flooded with dopamine and norepinephrine, skipped over logic and landed directly on tribal violence. "Hey!" Gary shouted, unbuckling his seatbelt. He stood up, his face flushing red. "You get away from her. We aren't touching her." Marcus yelled, backing up until he hit the galley wall. "She's crazy." "Don't you call her crazy," another passenger screamed, a grandmother in 14C who suddenly felt strong enough to punch a horse. "I saw you looking at her." Predators. It was a lynch mob forming in real time, accelerated by chemistry. The historical nightmare of American racism was playing out at 30,000 feet, fueled by a stimulant that removes the brain's ability to hesitate. Brenda saw her reinforcements. She felt vindicated. The drug told her she was a hero. "Grab them," she screeched. "Tie them up before they signal the others." She swung the bottle again. It smashed against the galley counter, showering Marcus with glass and red wine that looked, in the chaotic lighting, far too much like blood. 20 rows back, in the relative safety of the mid-cabin, Tasha Green stopped breathing. She hadn't taken a breath in 10 seconds because she was trying to identify the smell. She sniffed again. Short, sharp inhalations. Metallic. Kerosene. And horseradish? No. Not horseradish. Ether. Tasha's eyes snapped open. She looked at her hands. They were trembling, but not from fear. From anticipation. Her gums went numb. She turned to the man next to her. Luka Markovich had lowered his book. He was staring at the air vent above his head, his nostrils flaring slightly. He looked like a wolf testing the wind for caribou. "You feel that?" Tasha whispered. Her voice sounded different to her own ears, crisper, faster. Luka turned to her. His flat, dead eyes had a glimmer of life in them now. A shine. "The air," he said. His voice was a gravelly purr. "It tastes like the 90s. "It's Coke," Tasha said, the realization hitting her with the force of a physical blow. She tapped her nose instinctively, a muscle memory she thought acquired in law school. "The air is full of cocaine." "High grade," Luka amended. He ran a tongue over his teeth. "Very little cut. Diesel wash." Across the aisle, Jasmine Vega pulled her massive headphones off. Her eyes were wide, her pupils practically vibrating. She looked at Tasha, then at Luka. A slow, incredulous grin spread across her face. "Is it just me," Jasmine said, speaking at 1.5x speed, "or did this flight just get really, really interesting? I feel like I can hear the color blue." "It's an overdose event," Tasha said, her lawyer brain kicking into overdrive. The beta blocker she had taken earlier was fighting a losing war against the ambient powder, but it gave her an edge. While the normies were spiraling into psychosis, Tasha was entering the zone. That hyper-focused, bullet-time clarity that allowed her to bill 80 hours a week and spot a typo in a 400-page contract. If the ventilation is compromised, everyone is getting dosed. The civilians act first. They have no tolerance. They looked toward the front of the plane. The screaming was getting louder. Brenda was now standing on a seat, directing Gary the accountant to tackle Tyrell. "We have to stop them," Tasha said, unbuckling. "They're going to kill those kids." "Why us?" Luka asked, though he was already unbuckling too. The cocaine made him feel lighter, younger. The arthritis in his shoulder was gone. He felt capable of violence, but disciplined violence. "Because we're the designated drivers," Tasha snapped. "Let's go." Meanwhile, Senator Vance, in seat 1A, was having a religious experience. He had decided that the turbulence wasn't weather. It was a message. God was shaking the plane to separate the wheat from the chaff. And Vance was definitely wheat. He felt amazing. He felt powerful. He felt like he could bench press the fuselage. The speech he had been writing on his laptop, a dull, meandering thing about tariffs, suddenly seemed inadequate. He needed to speak truth. He stood up. He tore off his tie. It felt constricting, like a snake around his neck. "My fellow Americans," Vance bellowed. His voice boomed, projecting without effort. Nobody paid attention. They were too busy watching the race riot starting in the galley. Vance climbed onto his seat. He needed higher ground. "The storm is upon us. The wall must be built in the sky. I see the infiltrators. He pointed a shaking finger at the ceiling. The clouds are entering the vessel. Purity. We need purity. He grabbed a bottle of sparkling water and poured it over his head, baptizing himself in the fizz. I wash away the weakness. I am the instrument of the storm. The flight attendant, Sheila, came around the corner from the cockpit galley. She stopped dead. She looked at Vance, soaking wet and screaming about skywalls. She looked back at Brenda, wielding a broken wine bottle like a shank. She looked at the white haze drifting through the cabin. Sheila sniffed the air. She paused. She recognized the smell from the dressing rooms of the Strata circa 1986. Ah, hell, Sheila muttered, dropping a stack of napkins. It's a snowy day. Just as Gary the accountant lunged for Tyrell, intending to tackle him in the name of suburban justice, the sound of the cabin changed. It wasn't a sound that started, it was a sound that stopped. A Boeing 777 cabin is a noisy place. Engines drone. Air hisses. And usually, there is the background radiation of children. The crying of the infant in 12B. The whining of the toddler in 4A who wanted an iPad. The giggling of the twins in row 22. Suddenly, instantly, they all stopped. It was a physical wave of silence that rolled from the front of the plane to the back, faster than the violence. The crying baby in 12B didn't taper off. He just clicked off. His eyes rolled back, his little body went limp, and he slumped against his mother's chest. In 4A, the toddler dropped his toy. His head hit the tray table with a soft thump. In row 22, the twins went boneless in their seats, their mouths slightly open, breathing shallow and slow. The cocaine, a powerful vasoconstrictor and anesthetic, had hit their small bodies with the force of a sledgehammer. Their metabolic rates couldn't process the stimulant fast enough to get high. Instead, their systems were overwhelmed, forcing a hard reset. They passed out into a deep, chemical slumber. The silence was terrifying. It cut through the paranoia. Gary froze mid-lunge. Brenda lowered her wine bottle, her chest heaving. The children, a woman whispered in row 10. Look at the children. The mother in 12B shook her baby. Leo? Leo, wake up. Leo did not wake up. He was limp as a rag doll. They killed the kids. Brenda screamed, breaking the silence. Her paranoia leaped to the worst possible conclusion. The toxin. They gassed the children. She pointed the jagged glass at Marcus again. Murderers. The pause was over. Then violence exploded.